Not All Cats Go to Heaven by C.L. Brasch. The Farmer's Almanac may not have predicted that Charlotte's winter of 1964 to 1965 would be a snowy one, but the boys of Beechwood Acres could feel it in their bones. The autumn of 1964 had been chilly, and the boys were ready for some good snow cream, snow forts, snow sledding, and snow days out of school. Once the leaves had fallen on particularly frosty days, the boys and a few girls would all gather together indoors to play Angel. Sandy blonde brothers, Davy and Chaz, chose that name for their neighborhood's favorite card game. The rules were simple. Take all 52 cards out of a deck of playing cards. Place each card down on the floor face down. Then, each child would take a turn and guess what a card was. Someone else would turn the card up to see if the guess was correct. If it was, the child who guessed correctly could take another turn. The game was called Angel because you would need a guardian angel to help beat the starting odds of 1 in 52 for a correct guess. Davy's guardian angel was called, appropriately, Angelos. He had adopted Davy as a worthwhile challenge. Davy was a lovable rascal, but he did not have a lick of sense. Without a guardian angel, Davy would never see 10 years old on this side of paradise. Being a good sport, Angelos would usually let Davy know the value of a card before it was flipped up. Fortunately, no one in Beechwood Acres knew statistics and probability, so the neighborhood kids simply thought it was pretty cool that Davy never missed a card when playing Angel. Chaz was a couple years older than Davy's 8. Chaz knew that guardian angels could not exist, so he never had one. Consequently, it would drive him to distraction when he would go days without a correct guess, and Davy would consistently score 100%. On a cold Saturday in late autumn at Preston Dino's modest brick home, Chaz had grown rather tired of scoring double goose eggs at Angel. Thus, he recommended that the kids grab some big cardboard boxes and tackle the Hill of No Return. The Hill of No Return was a steep, semi-grassy embankment at the Beechwood Acres I-85 railroad overpass. If you slid in a box pell-mell down the embankment to the railroad tracks and stayed within the hill's grassy parts, you would most likely survive. If you hit the hill's Carolina red dirt portion, you would start tumbling fast. You would then wipe out in a tangle of cardboard shreds, dirt, scrapes, and unforgiving railroad bed gravel. Such unfortunate souls were not allowed to return to the top of the hill for the rest of the year. Wisely, most of the neighborhood girls avoided the Hill of No Return like the plague. Chaz exclaimed, "Prez! Let's all head over to the Hill of No Return and get some downhill runs in while the sun is still up." Davy and Angelos were on another win streak at Angel, so Preston was happy to comply. "Great idea, Chaz. Carol Randy picked up a half-dozen cardboard boxes from the back of A&P yesterday. He has them in his backyard behind the tracks, and we could be there in 5 minutes. Davy thought Chaz was overly eager to go box sliding. That usually spelled trouble. With some hesitation, he signed up for the plan. The motley crew arrived at the base of the embankment in a matter of moments. Carol Randy was a bit put out that Chaz had reserved his own special cardboard box. "Huh, I guess Chaz is too good to slide in an A&P box. Maybe he has his own soapbox derby special box." In truth, Chaz had very nearly won that year's soapbox derby. In the process, he had learned a thing or two about aerodynamics and lubrication. In fact, after Thomasboro Elementary let out the day before, Chaz had clandestinely applied a layer of turtle wax to the outside of his special cardboard box. It was as smooth as a well-oiled mirror. Davy gave the go signal at the top of the embankment to 6 scruffy lads in cardboard boxes that looked a bit like World War I tanks from the side. It was no contest. Chaz and his wax steed flew down the grassy hill in a flash. Unfortunately, Chaz flew down so fast that he could not steer his box. He let loose a blood-curdling scream. An embedded piece of razor-sharp glass had ripped through his box and his right thigh like a hot knife through cold butter. Davy saw the trail of blood Chaz left in his wake and ran headlong down the hill. The other boys had already surrounded Chaz by the time Davy reached the bottom. The neighborhood's aspiring nurse, 12-year-old Ramie Jean, had heard the screams from her nearby house. She quickly applied gauze and iodine to Chaz's bleeding thigh. Chaz was in a real pickle. He knew the penalty for such a substantial injury while box sliding: a lifetime ban from the sport. "Prez, I never saw that piece of glass jutting out. Honest." Preston shook his head as his face grew ruddier than usual. Chaz, you know the rules. Any injury that requires Ramey Jean's attention ends your box sliding days forever. It's the only way we can keep our folks from finding out about this hill. Whatever Preston determined would be final. His word was law in Beechwood Acres. Davy jumped in to stick up for his older brother. Prez, I have an idea. Let's make a deal. If you let Chaz off the hook, we'll collect all the neighborhood Christmas trees when they're put up by the street. Then we'll bring them here to the base of the hill and mount them up at the railroad tracks. At the first snow, Chaz and I will pile up fresh snow on the Christmas trees and make a sled jump. We'll all go to the top of the hill then and fly down to the jump on our sleds. Once we hit that snow-covered ramp, we will all be airborne over the tracks. We'll all crash land over the fence in Carol's backyard. It will be a blast. It was totally insane, and Preston knew it. Of course he loved it. Wow. Davey, that is fantastic. We'll get all the guys together to help you gather the trees and build up the snow ramp. That way it will all happen faster. Chaz, welcome back to the Hill of No Return fraternity. Davey was on a roll as he snapped his fingers. Prez, I've got it. We can time our sled run with the freight train. Carol can keep an eye open for the train and signal all of us on the hill at just the right moment. We'll sled down and hit the jump just before the train goes by. Prez was visibly impressed. Super. It's a plan. Let's all pray for a good snow. A good snow in Charlotte will require some serious prayer. The city only averaged 5.7 inches of snow a year. For Davy's harebrained scheme to work, he would need at least 10 inches of snow in a single snowfall. Consequently, Davy quietly asked Angelos if he could lend a hand over a wing. Against his better judgment, Angelos said he would check in with his top management. Top management must have been willing because on January 16, 1965, a record 10 inches of snow blanketed Charlotte. Thomasboro Elementary was closed the entire week, so the Beechwood Acres boys had plenty of time to collect discarded Christmas trees, mound them up at the base of the embankment, and bury them in the snow by the railroad tracks. Ramey Jean kept a close eye on things just in case her services would be needed. The target date would be the middle of that week. Being older and smarter than Davy, Chaz had a brilliant idea. Totally forgetting about the turtle wax debacle, he snuck out one frigid night and ventured over to the hill under cover of darkness. Quietly grabbing a bucket from Carol Randy's yard, Chaz filled it from the spigot and made his way up the hill. He poured the water down the left side of the snow-covered embankment. Chaz repeated this process over 20 times. By the time it was nearly a freeze pop, the left side of the bank was an eerily smooth sheet of ice. That same night, Davy snuck out of bed and quietly tiptoed to the chilly outside laundry room in which the sleds were stored. Davy opened up some of his dad's turtle wax and thoroughly greased the runners of the sleds. Davy reasoned that if it worked well on cardboard boxes, it would work great on sleds. The following day was the big event. Rubbing their hands together to stay warm, at least a dozen boys and girls gathered at the snowy top of the Hill of No Return. Carol waited at the bottom, ready to signal the approach of the Southern Railway train. Ramey Jean also waited at the bottom, ready to dispense first aid and gloves to the mittenless and the brainless. Sneezing up a storm, Davy and Chaz staked out the left side of the hill, sleds in hand. Carol looked down the track and heard the train blow its horn at the Hoskins Road crossing. This was it. He raised both hands towards the brilliant blue sky. The train approached. The engineer rubbed his eyes as he thought he saw an unkempt lad standing in the middle of the tracks under I-85 holding up both hands. Frowning, the engineer backed off the train's throttle. That was just what Carol had expected. He had to time this thing perfectly. If he yelled too soon, the boys at the top would have a good sled run and nothing else. If he yelled too late, a half dozen boys would collide with a 250-ton diesel locomotive and a very angry engineer. If Carol yelled at just the right second, the Beechwood Acre boys would attain immortal glory. Immortal glory was with Carol on that bitterly cold day. He lowered his hands and screamed at the top of his lungs to make Stentor proud. Instantly, the lads on top of the hill lunged onto their sleds and raced for the bottom. Davy did not know about the ice-covered hill under him. Chaz did not know about the turtle wax on the sled runners. Both boys knew they were going way too fast within a second of departure. If sled jumping had been a winter sport at Innsbruck, Davy and Chaz would have brought home the gold. They hit the glistening snow jump at over 120 miles an hour and screamed so loud the engineer heard them over his train. He reached for the brakes, but it was too late for that. Davy, Chaz, and 2 sleds cleared the front of his train with yards to spare. And the next instant, a confused jumble of boys, sleds, eyeglasses, and gloves cleared the train with mere feet to spare. It was a glorious mess. But what goes up must come down. Davy and Chaz were going so fast and so high that they flew over Carol's backyard and hit the interstate grade at an angle. The other boys landed in a snowy clump in Carol's yard. Their sleds followed momentarily, landing on them. All the boys were as punch-drunk as a boxer after 10 rounds. The train sped by, air horn and swear words angrily blowing. Preston dizzily stood up as he shouted to no one in particular. "Hey, that was great! Let's do it again!" Raimi Jean shot him a disapproving glance as she worked hard to dig Chaz and Davy out of a serendipitous snowdrift. It was the only thing that kept them from breaking their full necks. Davy came back to the world of living with a feeling of warm, wet sandpaper on his left cheek. Something was licking him. Raimi Jean cried out, "Davy, it's a kitten! You landed on top of a gray kitten! He's as cute as a button!" It was a gray kitten, and he was as cute as could be. All the kids quickly gathered around the little fellow. Carol said, "Hey, he doesn't have any tags. Maybe he's a stray cat. What should we call him?" Raimi Jean quickly settled that issue as she smothered the purring kitten with hugs and kisses. "Buttons. We'll call him Buttons because he's as cute as a button." Preston spoke up. "Great. Buttons it is. Davy, you and Chaz landed on him so he can stay at your house." Davy and Chaz gulped simultaneously. Their mom, Dottie, was not known for her love of cats. Perhaps it was best not to mention Buttons to her. In today's world, we would say that Dottie had anger management issues. Davy and Chaz simply knew that it was a good idea to be in the next county if their mom threw a Dottie fit. Somehow, Davy and Chaz managed to sneak Buttons home and keep him hidden from their mom's sharp eyes for the rest of the day. She woke up that night thinking that she heard a cat meowing somewhere, but she imagined it to be a dream. Unfortunately, you can only hide a hungry kitten for so long. Davy and Chaz had 2 younger brothers, Martin and Yanka. Both boys loved kittens as much as they loved fresh homemade pancakes. The 2 things just went together in their toddler minds. Thus, as Davy, Chaz, and their mom snoozed the morning away, Martin and Yanka gathered up Buttons, Aunt Jemima pancake mix, milk, 1 egg, and maple syrup. Not knowing how to cook, they simply used their bed as a big mixing bowl and stirred together all the ingredients, cat included. Buttons happily slurped up the milk as Yanka broke the egg on the kitten's head. Martin and Yanka giggled loud enough to wake their mom. When she stumbled sleepily into the mixing bowl, she fainted dead away at the sight. Of course, this just made Martin and Yanka giggle all the more. Covered in egg and maple syrup, Buttons looked away at Dottie's face. The boy's long-suffering dad, Chuck, woke her up and stoically gathered her things together to visit the Nervous Breakdown Center at Charlotte Memorial Hospital. He had taken her there several years earlier when Chaz and Davy were toddlers. Chuck knew that Dottie was due for a stay after Martin and Yanka had been born. 4 boys, 2 nervous breakdowns. There was an odd symmetry to it. Chaz and Davy had been through this before. They knew that sooner or later their mom would return and there would be the devil to pay. They were right. When Dottie returned home one evening after her short stay at the hospital, she threw a Dottie fit to remember. She unceremoniously tossed the uncomprehending cat into the outside laundry room and returned to the house in a huff. Slamming shut her bedroom door, all 4 boys knew it would do no good to appeal to their forbearing dad. Buttons was consigned to the laundry room. Davy snuck in later to wrap Buttons in a blanket and give him a bowl of cat food. Sad to say, the outside temperature dropped to 12 degrees that night. It was hideously cold for Charlotte. When Davy opened up the laundry room door the following morning to give Buttons some fresh warm cream, he came upon a horrible sight. The poor little fella had frozen to death during the long night. Davy was inconsolable. He knew that if Chaz, Martin, and Yanka found out, they would cry for an eternity. Thus, he pulled a garden spade off the wall, gently picked up Buttons, and went to the back of the yard. Once there, he dug a proper grave for his furry little friend. Choking back his tears, he stumbled over the proper words for a funeral. The previous Sunday at Thomasboro Baptist, the preacher man said that when you pray, keep it short and simple. That was how the Lord would know your prayer was from the heart. Thus, Davy simply asked the good Lord up above to take Buttons home to glory. The Lord heard his heart. Ceremony complete, Davy knew he could not face his brothers to tell them the awful truth. He put on his day clothes and walked a mile to his G-Ma Helen's house. There, he and Chaz had a treasure stash of comic books that would make Stan Lee and Jack Kirby smile. After Davy's grandmother fixed a hot breakfast of eggs, grits, and bacon, he settled down to immerse himself in the world of Thor, Adam Strange, and Hawkman. They never had to bury a kitten. Davy returned home at the end of the day. Fortunately, his three brothers thought Raimi Jean had kidnapped Buttons and was showering the willing cat with love and affection at her house. Davy bit his lip until it bled, and he kept silent. That night, Davy could not fall asleep. He had an awful night terror that Buttons, cold and alone, was meowing in his makeshift grave. Davy ripped the covers off, grabbed a wooden slat from his Lincoln logs, and flew out the back door. He just couldn't leave his friend alone in the hard ground. Davy cried so hard and ran so fast he did not see a shooting star rising up into the heavens. Davy was so distraught as he frantically dug up the moonlit grave with his wooden slat. Angelus heard him from half a universe away. Angelus made his way back to Earth, but with a quick stop along the way. Top management had summoned him. In North Charlotte's bitter cold, Davy had excavated the shallow grave, but there was nothing there. Just bare red dirt. Where was Buttons? Angelus kneeled beside his young charge with a purring gray package nestled in his arms. It was a radiant-looking Buttons. Davy rubbed his swollen blue eyes and cried out, "Buttons!" He nearly smothered the poor cat with hugs and kisses. Davy looked at Angelus with wide eyes and started to ask, "How?" The winged guardian simply smiled and replied, "Davy, not all cats go to heaven, just Buttons." The end.